Hey guys, welcome back to the Better Man podcast. Today I am once again joined by Brian Mackenzie, human performance specialist, author, and one of the most popular guests we've ever had on this show. So, Brian, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Whenever I have questions about human performance, and
Uh
for me that could be, talking about ice bath or talking about saunas or just talking about recovery. I mean, this is Brian is the guy that I think of when I have these questions, and so I wanted to bring Brian back on today. So Brian, I wanted to bring you on today because I wanted to talk about recovery for the recreational athlete, or for somebody who is not interested in doing Ironman competitions, but works out because they know it's good for them. They want to enjoy their workouts. They're interested in longevity. They want to live a long, high quality life to be able to maintain their independence as they get older. And so for them, they might be looking at things like, recovery work or sauna or ice bath or even just foam rolling and breath work, and looking at that and thinking, why do I need to do that, or why should I even think of doing that? So I want to touch on that. I think it would also be helpful to talk about what happens as you get older and what do you need to do differently. So I think I think that might be a great place to start. So, I think most of the guys listening to this are going to be 40s, 50s, 60s, probably some 70s and 30s too. So
huh.
for those guys who are no longer high school athletes, which is, pretty much all of us, what considerations do we need to keep in mind when approaching our workouts?
I think, in my experience, I mean, most of the people that I work with are what you've explained. I, although I work with some females, I have a professional soccer player right now, but I think she's really the only one on my roster. Outside of her, and th- three professional athletes, I have a cohort of men that you just explained that I
Awesome.
work in and around with. Most of these individuals, and I've got one as young as 24, um, they are really trying to do the thing that we're all trying to do is stay healthy.
Mm,
And what what we know factually uh, is that exercise is easily the most or best prescribed modality for the aging process and disease and to combat disease. Now, the term anti aging is false. There is no such thing as anti aging. You don't anti-age, and in fact, what's really sad about this is that there's actually doctors who actually have it in their title. They're anti-aging doctors. There's no such thing as this.
mm.
We all age. We all die. So far, nobody's made it out alive. And the aging process has to do with a multitude of factors. One of the primary factors is how well we are using oxygen.
Mm,
And in that process, well, so if you think about it, oxygen is probably one of, if not the most destructive molecules in the universe. It, we have so things get oxidized, right? You look at a car. If you don't take care of the paint, if you don't take care of all that, we've all seen cars that the paint oxidizes. You see metal that oxidizes. Everything is oxidizing because there's oxygen in the atmosphere. Um, and in fact, one of the compensatory mechanisms back when life began to explode and we saw dinosaurs and very large insects, things that were much larger, was due to the fact that oxygen levels were actually higher. So things had to be larger in order to compensate in this capacity. So without getting too far into that, the reality is that we can only stave off this process for so long, and how we use energy or how we transfer energy is in the more efficient process is by coercing some enzymes to use oxygen to break down substrates like carbohydrates and fats, sometimes proteins, right? So
Hmm.
that process is how we've created the complexity of how we stay alive. We stay
Hmm.
alive by transferring energy. If we stop doing that, we begin to die very quickly. So, movement, things like yoga, and what you're doing become very important for the individual so that things remain mobile and we can get blood flow to the tissue and we can continue to keep up this process. But so are things like quote unquote aerobic exercise, and even strength training to keep tissue robust and healthy. So this big overarching theme that I started with is that we understand that exercise is, in our modern day life, the number one prescription for health as we know it, right?
Hmm.
Now, what we start to hear in the world is things that become hot, like
Okay.
saunas or cold
Hmm.
plunges or whatever new fad pops up and can be
Yeah.
like CrossFit, or hit high intensity training.
And now
Um,
high rocks.
I don't even know what that is, but I'm
Oh
glad I
God,
don't.
I didn't know either until like a week ago. It's like CrossFit, but now there's endurance training with it. So you go like run a lap around the track, and then you do 50 burpees, and then another lap, and then you do like deadlifts, and I don't know. But yeah, there's new stuff.
Wow. All right. So, yeah, I mean, these are just hybridized versions of things like CrossFit. I mean, like Jim Jones basically did, I don't know if you knew about that one, but
Hmm.
Jim Jones became the hero WOD CrossFit. That, like, basically it was just these massive CrossFit workouts that took 30 minutes to 90 minutes to do, right? Like,
Mm.
just enormous. Anyway, um, so we've got all these things that are out there. And when you think about things like breath work, easiest thing to understand is that, oh, I'm going to use that to kind of calm down or recover or restore. And first, we need to understand that recovery, restoration, all of that, that is not switching off. That is, even though it's kind of an off switch, the what it's doing is it's driving more parasympathetic tone. So our nervous system now kind of moves its workload over to a side that innervates into other things like digestion, like being
Mm.
anabolic. Um, so anabolism is me going into a growth phase, right? Like this growth sort of opportunity. We all understand that if we were to go do some weightlifting and, then you take a couple days off and you get sore and all, this process starts of rebuilding and growing, right?
Mm.
Everybody is capable of stimulating things like this. This is where cold and heat start to come in, as we think of them as things that are gonna like help with recovery. And yes, we know factually the cold helps with recovery, helps with soreness, and it can help change mood. There's a myriad of other things that come with cold intervention, but to be clear, this is another stressor that we are implementing in order to kick into a process of this anabolism, sort of this growth, sort of this way of getting the body to respond in a more parasympathetic process, because you
So the
can't
so
just
the
be
recovery work isn't just it's not like you do the recovery work and then you're like, I'm all better. Like now I can go work out again. You actually have to use that as a transition to, okay, now I can really rest and now I can give
correct,
my body the time it needs to and be in
correct.
the state that I need to be to digest, to rest, to like actually recover.
Yeah, you're not going to do, if you're first introduced to a cold plunge, less than 40 degrees and you just ate, you're not going to do a lot of digesting by jumping in that fucking, excuse my language, by jumping in that cold plunge.
Yeah.
However, we do have, a lot of people who've learned to get cold adapted. So this is part of that adaptation phase where they don't get as stressed out getting in there. right? So the stressor, even though we all get a stimulus when we go in there, it's how we inevitably respond to that. And that's what, in the acute process, we all have a very similar acute response, but chronic or long term, that adaptation phase is what separates, let's just call it the men from the boys, right? That process, that adaptive process helps kickstart how well I'm going to respond to things. Now, the heat does the same. It's not the same thing, but it does the same thing. If I go into a 180-degree sauna, that's a stressor. It's
Yeah.
my body's response. And so I'll just explain a little bit about, and this kind of happens with the cold, but on the opposite end. But when I go into the heat, at first it feels great. But then as I sit in there longer, or whatever I'm doing in that sauna, as I sit in there longer, my heart rate starts to go up. My blood pressure starts to increase. This is a stressor. This is
Mm-hmm.
all stress. Like, to be clear, there is no life without stress. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to a point to where it's enough, right,
Mm-hmm.
of this stressor, and then get out and allow my body to, or allow my system to drop back out. That
Mm-hmm.
is the process of this. If I stay in too long, it'll take longer for me to drop out, right? It'll
Yeah.
take longer for my parasympathetic response to come back online, right?
Mm.
And so it's not an on switch, off switch. It's a how like, think of it as a toggle switch, right? Like I'm moving the toggle a bit, and it's starting to creep up, and then that's enough,
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm laying a foundation for here for understanding is everything is about stress, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, our modern way of living isn't working out for us
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
It's a proven fact. Like, there is no amount. The only thing we really have going for us is how comfortable and safe we actually are in a
Mm-hmm.
larger scheme, right? That has not provided us with better health. And if it did, we wouldn't be as sick or ill as we are, which I'm under the impression, based on what I've been able to gather, work on, go through with myself and with my clients, this is a mental thing. This is not a physical thing. We don't do enough physical training. We don't even come close to it. The commonality between blue zones is the fact that all of these people are moving more than all of us are, and they're over 80. Um,
What are blue zones for people who don't know what
People
blue
who
zones
live
are?
basically over 100 years, very healthy. They're
Yeah.
not. They don't. These are the places around the world that where we see the ultimate health, right? Living
Mm.
into your hundreds, the centurions, right, or
Yeah.
even over 80. But you're living in a way that you don't need aid, you don't need help. You're very healthy. You're still moving around on your own, taking care of
Yeah.
yourself. And the reality is there's been numerous books and documentaries done on these things.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, this is where the mind tends to go, and why this is basically, I look at this as a mental issue. Basically, the content of our container is a little construed, is that we hyper focus on things like what they're eating, when they're eating,
Mm.
like that. And it's like, yeah, that's great, except they all differentiate on that. They're
Mm.
all eating real food. So there's a common denominator. So let's just leave it at that,
Yeah.
versus the type of diet that they're eating. But the common thing they actually all have is they all move. And
Mm.
most of them are moving in ways that many of us are not, meaning they're going up steep hills, coming down steep hills, going in, growing their own food, taking care of their own food, right? This is,
Mm-hmm.
it's not hard labor, but it's laborious work each day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's done with a smile, because that's just how life is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, let's, moving out of the blue zones and into the reality of our modern life. The problem exists in the fact that we get glued to particular ways of doing things. Cold fits into that, heat fits into
Mm-hmm.
that, particular exercise routines fit into that. And there's nothing wrong with sticking to some of these things. However, what I think the foundation for movement actually involves a lot more walking than you actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And it involves being aware of that and your behavior patterns around that. If
Mm-hmm.
you can move or walk for more than 45 minutes a day without a phone,
Without a phone.
without distraction,
Yeah.
um, you have anything else on top of that becomes the icing for your
Mm-hmm.
life, right? And that's where it starts to really creep in. So most of what I do with the individuals that come to me is I will literally be like, hey, so we're going to start with walking. Then we're going to start with some breath work on both ends of the day. But the breath work may be involved in the walking with people. So you typically, it's like if you're walking, your mouth should not be open.
Mm.
Fact. Like that we know damn well that a mouth open if you're walking is a problem. That means you're an overbreather. That means there's something else probably going on stress-wise that
Mm-hmm.
we would need to address. And that's usually a container problem or mind problem.
Well, this when you
Yeah.
mention that, it brings me back to what you were talking about with oxygen before, in
Mm-hmm.
that oxygen sustains us, but it ultimately, like you were saying, oxidation eventually kills all things.
Correct.
So when we breathe through the nose, when we have control over our breathing, then that means that we use less oxygen, and therefore there's less overall stress on the body. Is that a
No.
fair no? Oh god. All right, I'm wrong.
Close. You are close. You are close.
Okay.
Low, so moderate to low effort work. If we're nasal breathing, we are most likely using more oxygen, okay? Because we are now not over breathing. When we are over breathing, even at rest. So as I'm talking, I over breathe, right? That doesn't mean you can't talk. However, if most of your day is talking, I can tell you right now, your stress levels are higher than what would be deemed healthy.
Mm,
There's really no amount of work you can do to combat that. You're going to be what you're doing. What we're doing is we're setting in motion what's called a dissociative curve, right?
mm,
And how this works is just think of it like a yin yang symbol,
mm,
and you've got to have enough CO2 in the body in order to make oxygen available. So think acid, alkaline. If I have too little alkaline, I don't have pH balance. If I have too much acid, which would be the same case for that too little alkaline, I have mismatched pH, right?
mm,
We have a very tightly monitored pH for a very good reason. It makes everything work in homeostasis. And the
mm,
body will always, there's nothing you can do about this, but the body will always try and find that space. But if I overbreathe, so if I just take, and anybody can do this where they take a number of big, deep breaths through their mouth
mm,
until you start to feel a change. That change that you're feeling is your lack of use of oxygen and your vasculature constricting, because your brain and nervous system are more intelligent than your mind is. And it constricts and restricts blood flow to your brain because you are limiting oxygen use so that you don't retard how the nervous system and brain are working. Right.
mm.
So that little high feeling you start to get is that constriction of those blood vessels that are occurring. That is a feeling that should, in most cases, say, "Oh, I should probably stop doing this because
So
I'm
that
getting a
reminds
little
me of
high."
like I can't remember which yoga instructor it was, one of the Bikrams, or one of the,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but they're like, and if your head just starts to feel a little funny, that's okay. It's your body getting used to all the oxygen, which is
If you're
total,
hyperventilating, that is not what
that's
is happening.
total nonsense.
Yeah, so that's the pro. So this is just one of those instances where what we think is going on isn't actually happening. And you could put on a pulse oximeter and hyperventilate, and what you're going to see is it's going to rise from somewhere between 96 and 98 to 100% SpO2.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is you no longer have biologically available oxygen. You're not using the oxygen, so it's sticking in the red blood cell. So that's what a pulse ox does, is it measures
Mm-hmm.
what's in the red blood cell, not what the system tissue is using. And
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so I want to ask the question. So we want to be using less oxygen. Is that correct? Or is that not correct?
You want to be using oxygen well.
Using it well. What is
Yes.
that? I mean,
Efficient oxygen efficiency is when I am at rest. So here's what oxygen efficiency is.
yeah.
When I'm at rest, my tissue is utilizing fat as an energy source. I'm utilizing oxidative phosphorylation. This is basically your aerobic. This is high aerobic. However, we're also using glucose at that point. You're always using glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain and your nervous system only function off of glucose. It can function off of ketones, but that's not really a long-term thing that's occurring. You are using glucose. Like your liver
Mm-hmm.
will convert fat and even protein into sugars to be used for glucose, because the nervous system needs to use it. Because the nervous system, when I'm thinking, when I'm talking, when I'm doing things, it's something that needs a little bit of a faster energy source. We're still in this oxidative pathway. But
Mm-hmm.
once I start talking more, getting more emotional, thinking more, that response becomes a little bit more excited. And so I start pulling. I need to start pulling from a faster process, right? So the cells start to get a little excited and start moving more. That starts to pull from more carbohydrate stores. So we're starting to move, even though we can still be in this oxidative place, we're starting to move into more glycogen or faster energy sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think of working out. If I go stand up, I'm immediately using up all the oxygen available to the tissue that was there. However, I might be moving fast enough to where I use it up. There's not enough coming in. So I start to, there's a transcending effect that happens with energy, right? Think of it as buckets. At the bottom is ATP. That's our currency for energy. Above that is your creatine, your phosphage and creatine. So it's your power energy source, right? So if I
Mm-hmm.
explode or do a push up or stand up really quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm using this real quick turnover. It happens in milliseconds, right? What replenishes that is this glycolytic system, which sits above that, which is really happening in milliseconds too. But that is where that is where I turn over glycogen, right? But what's replenishing that glycogen is my oxidative lactate system, right? So now we're starting to move into the oxygen. So this is why lactate will build up when we do higher intense things, right? Well, it just so
Mm-hmm.
happens you can do that sort of intense stuff with your brain and your overthinking and our stressful lives. And we will see, I will see people who wake up in the morning with higher than normal lactate levels, or even higher than very normal cortisol levels, because there is a direct correlation between lactate and cortisol. High intensity exercise can raise cortisol levels 500%. Okay. Now, but why is high intensity exercise so effective for people? Well, because it's a stressor that goes up and it should come back down. But if I'm somebody who's a high stress individual, I can only do so much of that before my long-term adaptation to that starts to get retarded, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just starts to get eroded in a lot of ways, and I'm no longer hitting that recovery cycle. So from here, I've got this transcending bucket effect that there's so much oxygen in the area, and it starts up top to kind of fill that process of how I'm using energy. But if I don't have enough mitochondria, or if I don't have a density of mitochondria and my energy way of using energy isn't there,
Mm-hmm.
which just so happens to fit right along the lines of doing a lot of walking.
Hmm.
You develop a massive, robust way of burning fat and mitochondrial biogenesis by doing lots of low level walking effort stuff. So
Hmm.
this creates the buffer for much of the more intense or hard work we're going to do. But we can help with that stuff with things like cold and heat, where
Mm-hmm.
these are now showing efficacy, much like exercise, because they're stressors in a regard that help stress us but bring us back down.
Hmm.
So we can kind of add these into my weekly schema of how I'm going about my lifestyle to make my lifestyle a bit more healthy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm trying to. That's a lot of excellent information. I think you did a really good job, by the way, of making it easier to understand. So
Okay.
first off, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciated that. So I like the idea that the more stressed you are, the more you go to these different tiers. Or I like the way that you described it. It makes sense that the more stressed you are, the more you're going to these higher tiers of energy. So you start off using fat as an energy source, then you go into glucose, then you can go into creatine, then you go to lactate. And each one of these is
Yeah.
basically successively more and more stress on your body. And
Yeah, I would look at it. So there's an even simpler way of looking at this is it all
yeah.
works. Everything's for ATP. So ATP is our currency for energy. So think of it like this. ATP is our money, our currency. All right. You are going to spend ATP regardless if you do nothing or everything. It's just
Hmm.
how much ATP, right? So think of it like this. You have two accounts and that's it. You got a checking account and you got a savings account.
Hmm.
And you get deposits of money in, right? Food, nutrition, right? You automatically are putting things into the checking account, but you're dispersing things over into the savings account as you consume more and more and more. However, here's the trick. You cannot just fill your bank accounts without spending money. You have to spend money. Now, everybody would want to pay their daily bills and their burn rate with their checking account,
Hmm.
not with their savings account. Savings account is for those big robust purchases, right? Like I'm going to go work out really hard or I've got a really stressful day, right?
Hmm.
That's a savings account spend. Okay? Or a marathon, you sign up for an event, right? That's a
Yeah.
big spend. Okay? Now, most of us are spending our savings account money
Hmm.
without realizing we've got this checking account and we need to do this low level thing in order to build a robust savings account that we can then go hit whenever we want, right? So a cold plunge, like a really cold plunge, is a quick spend on my savings account. However, it drops back really quick and allows me to get back to my checking account.
Hmm.
Going for a walk is simply spending money with your checking account and making a big, robust, it's allowing more robustness to happen in the savings account. CrossFit, savings account,
Hmm.
right? So earn going into the savings, right? So if I can get my walking in, if I can do the stuff that's really helping, I've eaten well, I've hydrated well. This is helping build those accounts in a way that allows me to spend money really effectively. Now,
Hmm.
looking at those buckets, how stressed out I get if I'm talking all day, burning through I'm blowing through ATP all
Hmm.
day. We know factually high stress individuals spend excessive amounts of ATP, then go and physically tax themselves in ways like high intensity workouts, thinking because it feels good, because you get a big dump of all these great feeling chemicals like
Hmm.
adrenaline and dopamine, right? That's a feel good right there. And that comes endorphins, dopamine, and adrenaline come with these things, but so does cortisol.
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And if I don't learn to get really good at clearing lactate, my cortisol levels stay pretty high for a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that messes with my sleep. You will not sleep real well if cortisol levels are high.
Yeah.
That's what wakes you up in the morning.
Mm. So I'm trying to put together this. So if considering all this information you've just given us,
Yeah,
that, these, a lot of the things that we do for our fitness are actually taxing the body. We're doing
it,
them in the hopes of provoking a stimulus, provoking a response that
correct.
ultimately makes us more capable. But then if we're doing too much, it's actually making us less capable. So someone who's, working all day, talking a lot, very stressed job, coming home, working out, and then coming to someone like you and saying, I want to start doing cold plunge. I want to start doing sauna. And we're like, no, 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 no,
No.
you need a nap.
Or check this
So,
out. There's no amount of walking that could mess you up.
okay.
Now,
So that's
that's
that's kind of what
probably
I'm
not
looking
true. That's
for.
probably not true for the guy who's not doing any walking.
Hmm.
But the reality is, you go spend 2 weeks doing some 45 minutes or so of walking every day. There is no amount of walking that's going to do damage, that's not going to enhance your physiology. So, this
Mm,
is where it comes down to, or check this out, breath work. Now,
hmm.
unless it's hyperventilation breath work, that can have a compounding problem if it's done in excess, right? So if I hyperventilate for too long and I'm a high stress individual, I'm ripping through ATP because I'm getting the cells in these excited states. There's a far more to that. However, I'm just simplifying. If I do some slow controlled breath work, or I go and do, like, look, there's really not a lot, no amount of yoga, unless it's really intense yoga, that I can do that's going to be bad for me. As long as I'm eating when I'm hungry and hydrating, dude, you can have at it for hours. Like,
Hmm.
go for it, man. Like, this isn't going to ruin you.
Hmm.
What will end up ruining people is going into these high stress environments, right? Like, overdoing the cold can be a overdone high stressor. However, it can be a really good enhancement if you know how much stimulus you can handle. So this is why I will range my clients from anywhere from 30 seconds to up under 5 minutes, right? And it just depends on how adapted they are and how well they're responding to the cold. Which, an easy way to understand that is, I get in a cold plunge, I get out in 30 seconds. If my body can warm up naturally, I'm I'm good to go. That's a good thing. However, if I'm doing a lot of lifting and I'm trying to build muscle, it's probably not the best thing to do over 30 seconds. Keep it under 30 so I'm not actually retarding that process. Um, the heat, the heat is actually much simpler, and
Hmm.
it is actually more of an enhancement than anything with things I'm doing, whether it be yoga, whether it be strength and conditioning work, whether it be endurance work. It's only going to enhance it. You can always get into a sauna and just get out once that first sign of kind of uncomfortable claustrophobic feeling starts to
Mm.
show up. That's roughly around a 130 heart rate. If you're sitting in there, your heart rate will increase to roughly around 130. But if you get uncomfortable for that, it is best to get out.
Mm.
It's a minor claustrophobic feeling. This is where we know a lot of the heat shock protein stuff is happening. However, this is where the blood pressure is reaching its height of comfortability, efficacy for um, blood pressure,
Mm.
and it's a good time to get out and then just let your body naturally cool down, and you're getting a lot of the benefits that we're looking at in terms of heat training, but we're complementing any sort of training that we were doing.
Mm. That's really good information. So I want to come back and I want to specifically ask you questions on those, because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
curious for myself, honestly, like
Yeah,
guidelines
yeah.
on that stuff. But
Yes.
I want to go back to the discussion we were having about energy and breathing.
Yes.
And if you can, you know, I would love it if you could give me like the takeaways in terms of action. Considering all these things, what are the actions and the habits and kind of like the guidelines that we should be making more of an effort to adopt into our lives on a regular basis?
Okay. Before I do that,
Okay.
here's the best piece of advice I've got. We want, we all seem to gravitate towards this advice in the form of action.
Okay.
And this is one of our downfalls because we're consistently looking how to improve something. And I'll steal something from Alan Watts right now. When we're trying to be better or we're trying to improve ourselves, we're not looking at the fact that, well, who's the one doing the improving then? The one who needs the improving. So it just doesn't make sense, right? Like I am, there's something flawed or there's something I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. Well, look at the reason. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to lay a foundation here. It's much
Yeah.
like the walking, right? Look at why you feel like you need to improve first. There's nothing wrong with you. There's
Mm.
nothing to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, we will continue to drift towards this improvement thing. And all we're looking to do is express things in a certain way and experience them in a way that allows us to kind of look or feel like we're healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the healthiest thing we've got is how positive and how healthy my mind is. Our biology knows what to do with everything we give it. So if I go lift weights, if I do yoga, if I do all that, it's going to respond without me intervening in any way, shape, or form, so long as I eat whole real foods, I take care, I drink enough fluids, right? Da, 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 da. Anyway, the part of this that's important to understand is that I am moving into something that I want to develop, something that brings me a feeling of joy
Mm.
and purpose. There's nothing wrong with me, right? But if I don't want to walk, but I have to force myself or discipline myself to walk,
Mm-hmm.
the very reason why I'm not walking is now being inserted into disciplining myself to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very big problem there. That
Yeah.
means I'm working off of a reward system that is going to fail at some point, right? Versus I'm walking because I get to, or this is part of my thing. And if you don't like walking, don't go walk. Get a beach cruiser and go ride a beach cruiser around town. Like, like, but do a beach cruiser. There's no race involved, just cruise, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
that out of the way. The actionable plans are this: have some sort of breathing practice that brings calm to you and allows you to fall into more of a creative space with your mind, with your brain, okay, with your thinking. Walk, laying a foundation, walk more than you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But walk without a phone, without any intention. Just go for a walk, come back, go. Then now start to layer in the action, the stuff that you really like doing. If you enjoy doing yoga, that is what you should be doing. If you enjoy lifting weights, you should be doing that. When's the best time to do it? Probably not all in the same day. So
Mm-hmm.
certain days I add in the lifting. Certain days I make sure I'm doing the yoga, right? If I want to start adding in cold and heat, okay, how much have I done today? Can I add these things in and still function well?
Mm-hmm.
Or are the wheels starting to come off, right? Largely, the biggest problem that we have is that we add more to our lives in terms of the modern lifestyle of work, um, errands, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff versus we don't do enough physical. There's no amount, like the physical isn't what's going to really make it so that you're not recovering. It's
Mm-hmm.
your actual lifestyle outside of the physical stuff that will. So always be looking back at, am I making enough time for myself to do the physical stuff that is important to me?
Mm-hmm.
And then I can go about my day with everything that I feel like I need to do. And if you have some sort of excuse, well, how am I supposed to pay my bills? Well, you're probably in the wrong thing mindset if that's your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I think what you said, that was awesome, by the way. I love that you say, like, by trying to be better, we're acknowledging that a problem exists. So
Yes.
we're like, we're creating the problem for ourselves. Like, I
Right.
was thinking, there's a book that I'm reading. The guy came on the podcast. It's called Awaken to Your True Self, and one of the core things in there is, by working on a problem, you're admitting the problems exist. Like, one example for me was, I just kind of redid my backyard. Like, I
Yeah.
got, it's beautiful. There's turf, there's plants, there's a playground, there's the cold plunge, there's, like, it's so great to go out there and sit out at night. And then I looked over at the corner and I realized I don't like that tree. And so I created a problem. Like, there wasn't a
Correct.
problem, but then I looked at it. So now I've got this problem in my head, like, oh, this isn't going to be great until I fix the tree. So,
Yeah.
like, you are only, you're creating the problem only exists if you create it. So, and the other thing I wanted to ask was, so, most of us are likely stimulating ourselves too much. What are the signs to be on the lookout for when we're overdoing it? What are some physical symptoms? What are maybe some mental symptoms, or what can we be on the lookout for when it comes to doing too much?
Go into the settings on your phone and look at how much time you spend on your phone per day on
Okay.
average. If that number doesn't give you a feeling of like, whoa, or wow, that's a lot of time, like, right? Um, you're probably pretty good. If you're perfectly fine with spending 6 hours a day on your phone, like, there's there's an issue.
I'm gonna look because I'm curious. I want to see what my. Do you know what your time is? Do you want to share it?
I think it's around 4.
Screen time. Show me screen time. Screen time. I'm at 3:19. I
Oh,
feel okay with
nice,
that.
nice. Yeah, I'm at 3. I'm at 3:14.
Ah, look at
So,
that. Great minds.
yep.
Great minds use alike.
So the um, reality here is that most of what we do at this point is here.
Yeah.
I'm not telling people what they should or shouldn't do. And I know I got clients that literally are on their phone all day long. I got clients that work out with their phones. Like, it's just like, hey, nah,
Mm-hmm.
that's not changing. Great. Okay, fine. Like, this
Yeah.
is like, okay, here's how we work from here.
Yeah,
Um,
I started scribbling my workouts. I realized I was doing that too. So I started scribbling my workout on my whiteboard, and then I put my phone. I still have my music coming from my phone, but I put my phone, like, really high up where I can't reach it now. So then I
yeah.
feel stupid when I try to go get my phone and remind myself, no, no, no,
Yeah, that's
just
awesome.
leave
So,
it up there.
dude, yes, this is all stuff that people can do just to, like, create reminders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had this one guy. I have a friend who he's going through one of our programs, and he hit me up and he's like, "Look, I'm getting all these." He runs a pretty big nonprofit, and it's for vets, and he sent us over an email and he goes, "Look, hey guys, I get this. I get these emails all the time from people that, like, are inquiring. They're like these meditation people or people who are doing breath work, and they want to kind of come work with us and help us out and help people out and da da da." And I'm just confused as to how to respond because we work with you guys, and it's like, I'm not going to change that, but, like, I just feel compelled to, figure out a path for these people who continue to, ping us. And I'm super grateful there's people out there who are looking to do things, but I gave him this analogy. I said, You know, most of us aren't really aware of our current mailbox, like a real mail, right?
Mm.
But we all do understand that we have to get the mail, right? So
Yeah.
90% of your mail is probably garbage, right? It's
Yeah.
just, it's all marketing scam stuff, right?
Yeah.
I said, so I explained to him, I was like, look, you have an incredibly big heart and it shows, but I want to point something out. Your heart is also getting in the way of how you're spending time because you feel like you need to respond to every single email that comes into your mailbox. And 90% of the stuff that comes into your email is junk.
Mm-hmm.
And until you can come to the reality of that and how you filter that, that's everything going on with technology at this point. 90% of the stuff you're looking at on social media is junk and it doesn't serve you in any capacity. However,
Mm-hmm.
there's a 10% that's great to connect with certain people or put some information out and whatever, right? That said, our involvement in the junk is what's killing us.
Yeah.
And so stop. You don't need to respond to everybody who sends you an email. And I learned this not the hard way, a great way, because I was like, all right, I'm just going to stop responding to all the emails that come in. And I did
Mm-hmm.
that. And you want to
Yeah.
know what happened? This radical thing happened.
Nothing.
People stopped fucking emailing me. They're junk.
Yeah.
Literally, when people communicate with me now, it's stuff that's important for me to look at. So I look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
And so my inbox is totally changed. My
Yeah.
messages are totally changed because I don't respond to everybody's response.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm not actually on Instagram anymore. I got off of Instagram. It was just too junky for me. I've got
Good
a
for you,
business.
man.
I got a business that does all that. And we have somebody who posts and I send them videos and they post that stuff for me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like my life changed.
And I'm totally comfortable with admitting that as well. Like every now and then I'll go look at social media, but as far as feeling an obligation to respond to people anymore, I do not feel the obligation to respond anymore. I also recently, I also stopped because I don't get as many emails. You know, I get like
Yeah.
tons of comments, tons of messages.
Yeah.
But I don't get as many emails. But I recently started like looking at emails and I'm like, no, like, so I don't respond to emails now either. And, you know,
Well,
I like saying this because most of the people who are sending me messages on social media, they're not listening to me go in depth on the podcast. They're not interacting with me in
no,
the Manful Yoga app and members
no,
area, you know?
no.
So like those are,
Correct.
I don't need to have those
That's why
conversations.
that's why I really stopped responding to questions that people wanted uh, actionable advice to fix a complex problem. I don't
Mm,
respond to those
yeah,
at
it's too
all.
hard to explain. It's like
Dude, are
having
you
a
kidding? Are you
philosophical
kidding me?
debate on Facebook.
Dude, that's a premium product, my friend. You exist in a place right now where you think you should get a premium product for free. Sorry, I don't play that anymore. No
Yeah.
more. No
Yeah.
more. You need to hire somebody for your complex problem. And if like there's a process to go through that. And the problem with social media is that everybody thinks all this information that I've or you have organized
Yeah.
and made a career out of should be free. That's how
Right.
they're behaving. It's not, and it's not going to be. Now, bring this over a little bit more. Some people, especially your crowd, especially if they're in their 60s and 70s, they're most likely not on a whole lot of social media. However, what I've started to find out with this group of with this group of boomers, right,
Mm-hmm.
is that they are still on their phones entirely and technology is too much. They're communicating with their families and stuff on
Mm-hmm.
these things versus actually being with real people enough.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of this happens, is where there's a disconnect, is we don't have this real connection to human beings
Yeah.
as much anymore. And that's as part of the process as anything.
Yeah. Like we were talking about blue zones before, and we
Yeah.
talked about the importance of
There you
walking.
go.
But the other part of that is all of these people who are living
Every one of
long,
them.
they have communities.
Every one of them.
They're eating
Every one of
dinner
them.
with groups of
You got it.
people. They're hanging
Yep.
out with people during the day. They're they're exercising and going on walks with people.
Yep.
And
You
so,
beat me to
I'm
this.
looking
I
at,
was going to come here.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like I'm looking at I don't know about you, but like I'm looking at my life and I'm realizing I'm mostly working by myself during the day.
Hmm.
I'm working out by myself. I'm going on walks by myself. I hang out with my children and my wife, and that's
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
you know, and
Hmm.
that's not a community.
Hmm.
That's not the sociability that we need to be getting into the same effect that those people in blue zones are getting. So
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, like, what are the strategies? Have you implemented strategies or have you started doing things to like create more community in your life?
Oh yeah. 100%.
Like what?
It's tight. It's tight. Well, I mean, one thing that I think about right now is so we got a puppy about a month ago who is a
Nice.
handful, and it's wonderful. But every day at the end of the day, we go to the park where he wins at playing with all the other dogs, and we have this park that all these people come together and bring their dogs together, and so there's this
And are
social.
you in Colorado?
No, no, I'm in Huntington Beach, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I moved back to Southern California.
Gotcha.
I realized, and this is part. This is also part of where I was going. Although I had this connection to the mountains, and I loved being in the mountains up where I was. It's a wonderful place. It was not my place. The
Mm,
ocean is where is my place. I am good to die here, if should need be.
mm,
But we typically, and it's just kind of come to a halt because the weather changed, but we're typically in the water in the ocean every day. And
mm.
there are always people there. There is always something going on. I hang out with my family. I'm close to my family. We see my family every week.
That's
My
awesome.
brother's my closest friend. He's got two kids. I'm around them. We spend time with so I have people that I meet every week. I go to lunch with or just meet in general.
Yeah.
It's I have clients that I'm around that I'm very close with, that I spend time with multiple times a week.
Hmm.
So I'm interacting with inside of a scheme of people where I'm with people. But I'm also like, I
Hmm.
earn all of that every day, no matter what. I get up in the morning, my day starts with me doing a minimum of 45. I've already done 45 minutes my bike in the sauna,
Yeah.
just cruising, not hard, just really slow and low, cooking in the sauna. I get out. I did some yoga this morning. Unfortunately, I did it with, I think he's your buddy Sean Vieg. So
Oh yeah.
I did a little bit of Sean's stuff
Dude,
this
that's
morning.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Does he know?
No,
Dude,
I've never even met him.
he'd
So
totally love it. He's the
yeah.
nicest
So
guy.
I'll either follow your stuff or his stuff.
That's fantastic, man.
He's hysterical. Dude. That
He
guy
is.
is
He
so
is
funny.
fun to watch, dude. He's a
Yes. Yeah.
performer. He actually has an
Yeah.
opera background. So that's why his voice
Yes.
is so like
Yeah.
projects so much.
That's great. So anyway, I did that before I did this, and I will lift after this for my hard work, my icing on the cake today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Those are
Yeah.
some fantastic changes. Also, the question that you ask yourself, and I think this is a great question to ask everyone to ask themselves, are you okay dying where you are?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
are you okay dying where that's a great way to
Yeah.
ask, are you
You're
happy
gonna
where you are?
die, and where do you want to do it? Is this
Yeah.
where you want? I grew up in Southern California at the beach.
Yeah.
I there is every single time my feet hit that sand or I get to the beach, it has been the same feeling since I can remember when I was 4 or 5.
That's awesome.
Right? It's this just glorious feeling of like, this is where I belong. Like, this is where I
Yeah.
want to be.
Yeah.
And
I'm
my
thinking
I basically am, like I go into the water and I become a merman.
yeah.
you know?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of I was thinking of that question, and I don't know if you can see behind me.
Yep.
There's a picture of it's just really cool. It's a wood framing carving of the Great
Yeah.
Lakes.
Yeah.
And that I was born in Cleveland. I've got family in Wisconsin. I went to school in Wisconsin, and thinking about me being in Texas and thinking about, there's no snow here. And if there is, it's catastrophic, and the entire world, the entire city shuts down. You
Correct.
know, but man,
Yeah.
so I want to ask. We talked about talking about changes as we get older. What gets harder? What requires more time? How do we need to change our approach to our workouts? Do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Um, I something pops up because a good friend of mine, who I consider probably one of the most artistic human beings I know.
Yeah.
He's his name's Pat Tenori. He started RVCA, RVCA, the brand,
Oh, wow.
and of everybody I work with, and I work with some very famous people. I work with some very high level people. There is nobody I have ever come across where more people want his attention than
Mm-hmm.
Pat. Um, Pat's going through some changes from Ruka to a new brand, whatever he's going to be doing. We were discussing this the other day, because it's tough, going through this process. And, it just came to me. It's just like, look, change is inevitable. Change is going to happen no matter what. Do you know what embraced change is? And he was like, what? And I was like, art. That's what embraced change is. I go and embrace the change and work with it, and I can create something out of it.
Mm.
So if I embrace the fact that my body is changing and I'm getting older, and I drive towards something like walking more, moving more, doing other things, right? Like I'm doing all this stuff, I'm embracing the change and I'm creating something out of that so that my body, so that my physiology, so that everything starts to change, right? I'm working with that change to embrace it and become a part of it versus how we fight change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're stressed out,
Yeah.
is we don't like the choices that we've made. So we look for excuses, or we tend to victimize ourselves in a way that allows us to be angry or upset about where we're at and what's happening to us. When the fact is we all know we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting out alive. How do you want to die? Because you're dying every day. Cells are turning over. The aging process is happening. Like, how do you want to go about that? I want full embrace, artistic, just splatter. Like, what is this gonna be? Like, I just want to have fun doing it, and I can't do things as what some of the things I can't do as well. Other things I can do much better, with better grace now, with more
Mm.
control, with more like I am way more precise with what I do because I can slow down enough to know when I want to go hard enough and hit it well enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? That took time. That took a lot, right? But I do a lot of new things, which is embracing change as well. Oh, I'm going to step into this new thing. I'm going to go take a class on painting or whatever. Like I'm into guns. I like to shoot guns. I've taught as a firearms instructor with a friend of mine, for a number of years. But I like to go to the range. I like to throw knives. I like to throw axes at targets. It's fun. It's precision work, right? Like
Yeah.
it's working things and being in things. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I also want to be skilled in something that it maybe, I don't know, might be some sort of tool that I might need to use, but I want
Yeah.
to use it well.
Yeah.
I don't want to be some Joe Schmo on the street who thinks because he watched the UFC that he knows how to fight.
Yeah.
I want to participate in jujitsu and striking and understand that and work with fighters and be a part of those things. And
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I don't
It
run
helps.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. It helps that you train UFC fighters too.
Correct. Right. And I do. And
Yeah. That's why I
so
said it.
yeah, but it's like, I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. I don't think I would have ever crossed that path had I not taken the step to get into some sort of martial art and
Yeah.
taken that approach. And I think what's lost, and here's the reality of yoga at this point. Currently in the Western world, there is no real version of what yoga was.
Mm-hmm.
That has been a changed thing when BKS and Pratabi Joyce came over, because they realized people couldn't handle here,
Yeah.
due to the level of comfort that we have, the realities of what yoga was, which was basically a martial art in that, but it was for constructing your body, right? Like in this hardcore sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that reality is like, but that doesn't mean you can't participate in something and transform yourself in today's version of that. You certainly can
Yeah.
and will, but take the mindset of a martial art into it, where you are a white belt earning your way through to a black belt, to ultimately, when you get that black belt, you keep the white belt mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go.
So that's I think that's really important. You know, I love that I love the description of embraced change is art, with working with it to create something out of it. I mean, that's a total, I mean, that's a fantastic way to looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's your expression, it's your art, it's you. What do you want? How do this is your canvas, man? Like you, like I mean, I can see
Yeah.
you're a pretty happy guy. You have a pretty good life. I can see that without actually being in Austin in your home with you.
Well,
I
thanks.
can walk in, but you can. We have that ability to see with anybody. I
Yeah.
can see people who are struggling immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, it's tough, man. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tough place to be,
Yeah.
and we don't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
There is no need. The only thing you need to do is die, and that's it,
Man, that's a weight off your shoulders when
right?
the bar is set that low. Yeah.
Go paint your canvas, man. Go embrace some change and make some choices. Like that. That's what power is. That's the only real power you got. Is
Yeah.
just choice.
So I also want to ask kind of specific questions about mentioned
Yep.
coming back to the hot cold therapy. So you
Mm-hmm.
gave some really good tips there. So for the sauna, when you reach 130 heart rate, or when you feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and based on your understanding of the different science that
Mm-hmm.
comes out, how often would you say per week, and like how many minutes in a session?
You can do the sauna every day if you have time for it. However, I would say 3 to 4 days a week. And it all depends on what you want to accomplish. There are two ways of going about this. I just wrote a big article for the plunge on sauna stuff.
Do you have cold plunge?
Yeah.
Oh,
I have a
cool.
cold plunge, and yeah, I think I connected you to them, didn't I?
I think maybe. Yeah. I've
Yeah,
been, that's the one I have. That's the one I've
yeah.
been using.
So I've got their sauna, their new sauna
Oh,
uh,
nice.
that they
That thing's a
create.
work of
Yeah,
art. It's
it
beautiful.
is. It is, and I can fit my bike, my old school Airdyne, which could go through a nuclear war, in there, and I can just ride it. And so anyway, I wrote this article for him because so I've been screwing around with heat for close to 20 years. So when I first got involved in trail running, etc., I started doing stuff out in the heat in Death Valley in the desert, and realized I needed to understand a very different environment very quickly in order to make it through there.
Hmm.
And so heat became a part of that process. At any rate, you got a couple ways of going about this. One, you can just be a traditionalist where you just go and get in a sauna and sit in the sauna until it's time, right? Which is roughly around 15 to 20 minutes. And
And this
you
is
will a
this is
traditional sauna.
traditional sauna. Okay.
Yeah. You can do infrared too. However, you're going to be in the infrared much longer than you
Okay.
would for a traditional.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
have. I have because I can't fit the traditional sauna anywhere. So it's infrared for me.
Yeah. So at any rate, you would go in and you would just sit right in a sauna. This is the traditional sense of sitting in a sauna.
Hmm.
You'd go in there, you'd work up to a certain time to where it gets uncomfortable, get out. Within, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks, your body will have adapted in some capacity to that heat structure, and you'd be able to take the heat up higher and higher if you should so choose. You will remain heat adapted. As long as you're doing that a couple times a week, you will not lose that over time, as long as you are consistently doing it at least a couple times a week, or once or twice a week, once adapted. The other way of doing this is getting bigger bang out of your workouts, etc., and or trying to make bigger heat adaptations. Because what you're not doing when you sit in a sauna is you're not actually getting your core temperature to the places that it could actually get through actual work, right?
Mm.
So that's part of why we shut down. Is we shut down because of heat, right? So 80% of work when we're working out is lost to heat.
Okay.
That's a lot of energy that goes to heat. So that's what's called joules, right? Instead of calories,
Okay.
that's joules. So at any rate, so to make this a little bit of a bigger play is you go work out,
Mm-hmm.
then go jump in make sure your sauna's on. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you're done working out, you go get in your sauna.
Mm.
Yep.
And does that does
That will
the
shorten the time that you are in that sauna.
okay.
Okay. That will definitely shorten it because your core temperature has gotten up, right? So now you're getting in the heat. Now, after a couple weeks of this, you will notice that you are now in for much longer period of time
Mm.
because you've made the adaptation and you're actually getting your skin temperature, which is a different sense, versus core temperature raising, right?
Mm. So what are the
The
what are
other
the oh no, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, the last version of this is if you've got a big enough sauna, you could either exercise on a bike or be doing squats or push-ups every couple of minutes or 3 minutes, just a few of them, and you will start to ramp up the internal core. So your core temperature will start to ramp up, right? So what I do is I go get on my Airdyne and
Mm-hmm.
I just start around 80 to 100 watts, and it's real easy. It's like walking pace, right?
Yeah.
But my sauna is at like 140, 150 degrees. It starts at.
Mm.
It works its way up towards 190. So at 45 minutes, I'm at about 190 and I'm still at the same wattage, but my heart rate is like 130 to 140.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at that point where I'm starting to, I've had enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then I hop out. It's just a very different heat adaptation. I'm able to handle much more heat than the other two, but that one is more towards performance so
Okay.
that when I'm training, I can actually push further.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
So for me, what I've noticed when I do, so I have an infrared just because that's what I have that works with my space.
Yeah, that's all right.
So when I notice that I'm doing it, I do notice that it helps with certain aches, pains, stiffness. Like my low back just gets really stiff. And if I spend some time, I find for me, my it's time moment is about 25 to 30 minutes. And that's when I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. And if I do that, my low back, like it releases. It's awesome. It feels great. I also notice from a vanity perspective, my skin just looks better. I'm like, oh, my
Mm-hmm.
skin looks like it's glowing today because
Yeah, infrared will do that.
yeah. And then I think after I get out, I feel like I've gone on a hike. Like I have that same sense of euphoria and like clearing my head that I get after getting out of a hike. The one thing
Mm-hmm.
that I can't track is one reason that saunas are beneficial, so they say, is the increased circulation that happens from them and from a recovery aspect. Is there or what does the science say on in terms of does this help with making me feel less sore the next day or does this help me get stronger more quickly?
Less sore isn't something that I've seen from it. However, what you're getting with that low back feeling better, so it's obviously tight tissue, because what the heat isn't necessarily going to change arthritis. However, it will. Well, I shouldn't have said that. you're going to move, you're going to get more blood flow in the heat. So think of it like this. I go into the heat, what happens? Things expand. So
Mm-hmm.
the blood, so your blood pressure goes up because your vasculature is starting to dilate more. So you're getting more blood flow as a result. Pressure has to go up. If
Mm-hmm.
my capillaries open up more, my heart rate has to go up and the pressure has to be more because I've got more open piping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus when we start to get more sympathetically charged, that starts to clamp down. And so then the pressure goes up because it clamps down, right? So when we go into the heat, things start to open up,
Mm.
right? So I've got more blood flow, so I'm getting opened up, so I'm looser. So it'd be a lot easier to stretch after you got out of a sauna,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's an optimal thing. As you heard, I went into the sauna today, then went and did some yoga.
Yeah.
That
I
was
mean,
that was the mechanism for doing that. Was I was definitely looser because
yeah.
I've got way more blood flow going, right?
Yeah.
I'm warmed up, I'm primed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a great way to do it. What I also like about the sauna is it tricks you into, it doesn't trick you, but it makes you start sweating. And I feel like as soon as you start to sweat, that's when you're like, okay, now I'm in my workout. So if
Yeah.
you don't want to work out, go in the sauna, start sweating, and then you're like, oh, I'm already sweating. Now I can. And yeah, this easing starting sauna and then going into stretching and going
Yeah, and
into
that's
yoga
something you could do
feels
if you've
awesome.
got if you're perfectly fine with doing it, is turning your sauna on, before you work out, go and get in it,
Mm-hmm.
get a little heated up, then go start your warm up process, whatever, and then come back after you've worked out and go sit in that sauna when it's really cooking,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, then cool down.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to the cold plunge question. So you mentioned
Yeah.
30 seconds. Don't go above 30 seconds if you're trying to build muscle, or keep it relatively low if you're trying to build muscle. And I've heard a
Yeah.
lot of different things in terms of, make sure that you do it. Don't do it 8 hours within 8 hours of lifting, or don't do it after you work out because then you're killing the inflammation process that helps with growing. So, what are some guidelines in terms of if I go for a run or if I lift weights? How long should I wait to go in the cold plunge, or should I do
Yeah.
them beforehand?
Um, yeah. So unless you're like a bodybuilder competing, or somebody who is competing for being strong, really,
Hmm.
really, really, really strong, um, I don't think it's necessary to avoid the cold.
Hmm.
My experience says not.
Okay.
Meaning you don't need to avoid it. However, you go in too long, you're going to retard things. Like, this is why we moved away from the RICE model, rest, ice, compression,
Yeah.
elevation. The ice part,
Hmm.
icing a wound, stops it from healing.
Hmm.
It just stops the process. What it's really doing is blunting the pain, which,
Yeah.
sure, we can take somebody out of pain, right? So just kind of think of that for a second.
Okay.
Anything over really 30 seconds on a day you're lifting is probably not the best option. However, you could repeat that several times, right? Meaning cold, get out, warm up, get in the sauna, cold if you wanted. Now, just remember, if I go in the cold and I go in the heat, this is another stressor. These are other stressors. I'm just ramping more stress in,
Hmm.
right? Am I responding to that, or am I overdoing it? So start low,
Hmm.
maybe one round, right? Days I do cardio, you can do as much cold as you want. However, I don't think there's really any benefit in anything over 5 minutes. In fact, I keep most people under 3 minutes.
Hmm.
Unless you really want to get your ego like
Right.
going, like, which is perfectly fine. Like, go for it. Go do a 6 to 10 minute cold plunge, like whoever just did a video. I
Hmm.
mean, that's great. However, um, you know, I think I just feel like there's better things with my time that I want to do, and the
Hmm.
people who I'm working with. We're just trying to get an aid.
Hmm.
So what I'll do is, if depending on people's how much time they have, the clients I work with, it's like and here's the other thing is like days people are lifting and they want to do the cold and heat. I don't start them on cold. I start them on heat. So they go heat, then cold. Cardio days, I have people go start on cold and then secondarily do heat. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance in there that I'm not going to get into here just because it's like everybody's individual. And I have protocols that I actually work on designing for these people, depending on how they respond and seeing how their physiology responds based on a consistency of understanding how their daily stress works. Like I'm looking at HRV, a lot of different things so that I understand somebody's baseline. Then as I integrate some of the exercise and some of these protocols, how that's affecting things. And then I can make adjustments based on that. But you're roughly getting kind of a screenshot of like how you can learn to manipulate these things.
Got it. Cool. So, and the one thing to keep in mind with these hot and cold therapies is your body should be able to return to homeostasis.
Correct.
So you shouldn't be.
What's the easiest thing to know in a 24-hour period? What's the first thing that you would be able to understand without a technology if it's affecting you or not?
Just how you feel.
Sleep.
Sleep. Okay.
Sleep is about what you did for the other 16 hours.
Okay. So you can use sleep as an indicator of.
Correct. Did I sleep well, or was it hard to go to sleep? Was I up throughout the night? Okay. Did in my life outside of physical activity, did I do anything differently? Did I do anything more? If you didn't, and you added in these other mediums, then it's like, okay, if I'm going to consistently hold on to this daily stress that I have in my daily life, then I need to alter the heat and cold a little bit in a different way. Right?
So that's important to know, not just because of being able to tell what you should and should not add onto your existing schedule, but also because it's just really hard to completely overhaul a lifestyle and like wake up one day and think, I'm going to live a healthy life now and do 5 new things.
I am basically an overhaul remover. Like I literally, because people have taken on all of this stuff. So I've got people. So most of the clients I work with are high performers in their industries. They're still working, right?
Yeah.
They're doing well. They work a lot, and they're working out. They're doing cold plunges. They're doing heat. They're doing hyperbaric chambers. They're doing all of these things, right? Wow. So I come in and I usually have to clean this stuff up because they're doing it in a way where, I mean, they're even doing the breathing. Like I can't tell you how many people, like there is probably at least 20 people I've come across where I've had to explain to them that the holotropic or Wim Hof breathing that they're doing is not helping them anymore. It's actually setting them off if they're not willing to change their lifestyle in what they're doing, right? Because they're stressing themselves. They're putting themselves into mild respiratory alkalosis. They're setting off their sympathetic nervous system. They're putting themselves into an excitatory state in the morning. Then they're going and doing a cold plunge. Then they're going to work and cranking out work. Then they want to go and do, they want to work out in the afternoon. They don't want to kill the workout. They don't want to do that. And it's like, okay, well, so here's how your physiology works. Like, so we remove it. And then all of a sudden everything changes. It's like, yeah, let's do this maybe once or twice a week. Let's not do it every day. And all of a sudden physiology starts to make these adjustments and we start to see big changes happening with them, right? Same happens with people who are doing cold. Like they're doing all these cold plunging, but they're not willing to change anything else. And it's like, okay, hate to break it to you, but your cold plunge is basically screwing you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, less truly is more.
But walking isn't.
But walking
so
isn't.
That, yeah, but there's the thing, right? Like, or slow controlled breathing isn't either.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
hate to break it to you, but your foundation you can continue to add to. And if you add more of that, guess what's going to happen? You're then going to be able to add back in the cold plunge. You're then going to be able to add back in some of the hyperventilation techniques,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you start, this is where people just start to kind of shit the bed, unfortunately. They just want to tack on all this high intense stuff that's burning up ATP,
Yeah.
just spending more savings, not realizing they're spending savings.
Well, I'm also curious, like, so something that I've realized is with the different demographics that I work with, you can tell there's a big difference between guys in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, not just because of, physical differences, but the guys who are in their 50s, they've started to move away from, am I doing this to satisfy they started to realize, like, I'm doing this to satisfy my ego. So you can have conversations with guys in their 30s and even in their 40s, and they're still, they're still doing things for their ego, or they're trying to, you're asking them questions, and their voice is getting deeper, and they're defending, they're still trying to protect their egos. And the guys who are older, they've started to realize, like, oh, like, am I doing this because I really want to do it, or is my ego involved? Like, are you,
Yeah.
if you look at one way that I like to determine whether or not I'm going to start doing something new, if I ask myself, would I do this if I couldn't post about it? then, then I wouldn't, then I'm not going to do it, because I'm like, well, what's the, and Cold Plunge knows this because they have the damn tablet slash phone holder built into the Cold Plunge. It's not like an add-on. You don't say, oh, I'd like to add that on. They give it to you. It's part of it.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Yes, it is.
my last
Yeah.
big question for you is your strategies for walking more. How have you consciously added more walking to your day?
Well, I've got a dog, so that
Dog?
helps. Yeah,
Yes,
getting a
that's a
dog,
great strategy.
and here's one: go adopt a fucking dog if you've got the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
Like, go save some dog's fucking life, and literally have a best friend, have a connection to an animal,
Mm-hmm.
and go walk and go make it your thing.
Mm.
Or so client last night, right? Like, we've been working together for over a month at this point, and this guy works hard. Also has triplets, brand new.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, so he's in it, right? This guy crushes work too. He's on the East Coast, and it's real hard. We've been real hard to get him going into building a program, and last night it was like, all right, so let's do this. How about you earn getting to your phone to check your email in the morning, because he has to put out fires.
Mm.
And here's what you're going to do. You're going to do some breathing and then you are going to get your coffee. You're going to make your coffee after you've done your breathing. Or wait, so no, it was breathing. Then he's doing a max rep push-ups,
Okay.
just one set to get himself up and motivated. Then he gets to make his coffee and check his phone as he has his coffee. The moment his coffee's done, he must go walk or run until his kids are up at 6:15, which it's mandatory. He has to earn getting to his kids by walking or running. So all of that has to happen in order for him to get to his kids. And him structuring it like that really helped him. Now, we'll see if that works, but he seemed to be, he was elated about this whole process of earning his time with his kids that he wants to spend with them, right? And he's not going to get it done in the evening, because the guy's at work all day, crushes work all day, already checking stuff. And then he comes home and it's like, he's got triplets. His wife wants time off.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Triplet.
Yeah. So at any rate, that's, part of the process. So figuring out ways to earn the things that you think you need to do, which you don't. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, right? But even though he believes he needs to see his kids, he does not need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need. There are parents who do not do that. And we can all agree on that. Now,
Yeah.
he wants to do that and wants to be a part of that. So let's start wrapping our head around the fact of what you need to do, what you want to do. That starts to change the structure of how you're actually getting towards things. Oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this because I want to be with my kids instead of need to. Change the language. That's how the container is working. You've got a language that you're speaking to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that process is that right there.
Yeah. Cool. Any other tips for your walking more in your own life? How have you made it? How have you made it so that you
I
can
just
walk
love
more?
I love it. I love the fact that I get to move. Dude, the more I move, the better everything is with my relationships with everybody around me, including who I work with.
So you're able to you consciously create the connection between walking and how much better your life is.
As we have come to find out, I move in excess of 3 hours a day.
Okay.
So there are some days that's close to 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool.
It's just getting, bro. I mean, I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
What
Like,
time do you go to bed?
I love it. I go to bed somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. I am asleep.
Oh, that's
Okay.
awesome.
I love that as much as I love waking up early in the morning, as much as I love going through all the things that I get to do and do. The time with the dog, the time with my fiance, the time with everybody around, like every moment I am like, yes, I get to go do that. Yes, I'm going to go do this podcast. I'm going to go talk with Dean. Like I'm excited about it. I want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm at a point where I am no longer like I've literally set up. I understand where my attention is and how I want to spend my time. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll have people pinging me about new things they want to do. I'm at my bandwidth right now. I'm good, man. I really appreciate you reaching out. I realize this could be an awesome project to do.
Mm-hmm.
I am in a very good place with as much as I can handle. I'm good.
Yeah. I think I can't remember the exact time that I interviewed you the first time, but there's a noticeable difference in your
Yeah.
demeanor. Like it's noticeable, it's palpable. Like
Yeah. Thank you.
it's pretty cool
Yeah.
to see.
That's a
And congrats
testament
on
to the
getting
work.
congrats on getting engaged. That's also new.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It is.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about that. Very happy about life. Very happy about where things are at. It took some, work, but
Yeah.
look, we all get to places where it's like we're taking every opportunity we can get in order to make it happen. And what I found out about that was that saying yes to everything,
Oh
man,
yeah.
I said no to any. Man, I didn't value my time.
Right.
I did
Yeah.
not value myself, and I I was taking anything and everything, trying to make, something happen out of a turd sandwich in some cases, right? But there were beautiful opportunities in there as well, right? And it's just like, but the more I started to understand myself and look at my own behavior, I stopped trying to improve anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started blockading my time like it was the most important thing I've got, because I truly do believe that.
Yeah.
Like it is. And
Yeah.
who I spend it with is a part of that, right? So
Right.
that means they're as important to me as my own time.
Yeah. We're gonna have to have another conversation and go into just how you went about doing this over the last few years.
I mean, it's actually pretty simple. The easy version of it is it's like, we're all playing this kind of game out here in the world right now where we're trying to pay the bills and earn money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I've been all over the world. I was just down in Costa Rica, and it reminded me, this reminded me when we went down to Costa Rica, is we stayed on this property on the beach in the jungle. And there was this couple that was taking care of the property. They weren't the owner of the house, but they lived on the property and took care of things. They were obviously kind of made a little bit of money, but they were allowed to live on the property. Anyway, they had nothing. They just had their little dogs. They had very little. They fished every night for their food. They grew their own food, right? And I was like, and these two people were so friggin' happy, like so happy. And it reminded me again of the fact that if is it making money that's going to make you happy? Because I know a number of billionaires and they're miserable. I know one that's not. I know a lot of people who make an absolute metric ton of money, maybe not billions, but are absolutely miserable. I know people who are that are middle class that are absolutely miserable chasing this thing they think they need to be doing. Can I live within the means of what it is I'm doing? Can I be happy within that? And that was what I came to the conclusion of. I don't need to make more, do more, be more. And yet every instant, every day, I'm shocked at how much money people want to pay me to do the things I'm doing. I'm fine. I'm content. I don't need more.
Yeah.
I have the people in my life I want. I don't need to do what society's doing and chasing all this stuff anymore. I don't need to do it. I'm content.
Yeah.
And yet I still make money. Weird.
I know.
Now
right?
it's the oddest thing. I'm not chasing that thing, that carrot, and yet I'm putting carrots in the basket every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was an awesome conversation, as always. And I'm truly happy for you. I'm excited that you're back where you plan on dying, and obviously don't want that to happen anytime soon. But it sounds like you're doing really well. Breathing, walking, not getting too into the weeds with fitness fads. By the way, I think everyone can benefit from breath work, and I've got a couple programs that do a really good job of it, called a series called the Breath Series, but we don't truly go into only focusing on the breath. So that is what Brian does with Shift Adapt. So we'll put the link for that in the show notes here, so people can check that out. Do you have anything specific? Do you have like a beginner's course with that, or
there's an entry into breath work. If they just go to shiftadapt.com/breathwork, they will get a taste of kind of just doing some breathing exercises, connecting that to an assessment so that they can understand where they're at. Secondarily to that is our membership, which is like, it's $30 a month. Go give it a shot for $30. And you've got entry with breathing and moving. So just understanding that. Then you've got entry into how we play with strength and conditioning and how we integrate breathing into that.
Yeah, you mentioned breathing. You mentioned focusing on nose breathing between sets the last time we talked.
Yeah. So, getting your breathing back down to calm nasal breathing, like that is a very good indicator that you are recovered from things. That more so than most other things, time, whatever. That said, we integrate all of that we're about to go into a cycle in the next 2 weeks where we're going to be using heart rate zone training and connecting that up to the breathing gears. And how somebody actually can develop very, very robust fitness per se, or high level aerobic efficiency through this mechanism.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So guys, definitely go check out Shift Adapt. Brian, thanks so much for joining me for the conversation. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hope to have you on again soon. Guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you on the next one.
If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.